Oliver Miguel. Ronan on keys, Luis on drums, Cam on bass. Yowza. So I got to tell a story of these three young men sitting right up here. When I announced that Amy was going to sing Highway to Hell, they were like, yeah. And then that really beautiful, slow song began. It was still pretty cool, hey? Yeah, she can sing. That girl can sing, can't she? Yeah, buddy. So I couldn't be more pleased to introduce you to our guest speaker today. Reverend Connie Phelps comes to us by way of Edmonton right now, but she really comes to us from the Center for Spiritual Living in Kenya, Africa. And every year she comes back to Alberta and takes care of business and all kinds of different kinds of things. And we usually have her speak here. And she was scheduled to speak this last fall, I think. And Reverend Connie received, when she came home, she received a health diagnosis that required quite a bit of medical treatment. And it was a kind of a scary time for all of us. She wasn't able to speak for us. She wasn't able to speak at the Canadian New Thought Conference because she was going through this medical treatment. And who she is now and where she was when I saw her 3 or 4 months ago is the difference between night and day, because this woman has gone from being quite ill to being this radiant person that you're about to hear speak and tell us about her healing journey. We've known each other for many, many years, been colleagues for many, many years. She has served a number of different centers here in Canada before she went to Kenya to start the work there, and she has all kinds of stuff to share with you. So please give a very warm welcome to Reverend Connie Phelps.
I don't need that. Thank you, my darling. Thank you. Good morning. I want to start this morning by just saying, I'm going to need that pat. Yes, you are. Thank you. For those of you, some of you probably know this, that have been around here for a really long time, but this is my spiritual home. So coming back here is always a treat for me, because I first discovered this teaching at the Calgary Centre. It was positive living back then. And back in the 90s, so I'm really dating myself, I did all of my studies at the Calgary Centre. I served as staff minister. Actually, Reverend Marjorie and I did all of our, well, back then it was 5 years of classes together. So I go way back with many of you in this community. And so as Pat was saying, I had this experience this year, which I'm going to talk more about, but I just want to start by saying, all of the ministers and practitioners that you saw before you, and we talk about this thing that we do called spiritual mind treatment. Well, I got to tell you, it works, because my great gratitude to my bud Pat and all of the other ministers and practitioners and other people at the center that knew about the journey I went through. It felt like I was lifted up in a web of consciousness for the last 6 months, in a web of love, and I am eternally grateful for that. So thank you for everybody that held that consciousness for me. So I want to share with you a quote by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And it was his address when he was the principal speaker at the dedication of the Christ Church of Religious Science in February 1959. That was the very first center for, now we're known as Centers for Spiritual Living. And here's what he had to say. It is our endeavor through our educational system to teach people what this principle is and how to use it. It is not our endeavor to convert anybody to our faith. It is to prove something, first of all to ourselves, because really, who else is there to prove it to? than to the world. And we have no authority before the world and ask for none, and will never have any, I hope, other than the authority of the work that follows the word. Powerful, powerful words. And that quote pretty much sums up my life for the last, it was 9 years ago this month when I first went to Kenya for the very first time. And as I've been continuing to be there and grow this teaching in that culture, my journey has been to prove to myself, first and foremost, that what we teach is the truth, with a capital T. So what's the truth? Well, the truth is the truth. And it's true for everybody. As Holmes would say, the truth is the truth. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what color you are, what age you are, what gender you are, what sexual preference you have. Nothing matters because the truth is the truth for everybody. So my journey has been, if that is true, and truth is truth, and the truth is that there is a power for the universe that always works for our good. So if that is true, in the midst of whatever might be going on. Anybody here have anything going on that they'd like to shift? You know, sometimes life happens, right? So whenever anything is going on, or even if nothing is going on and you just want a greater expression, to remember that the truth is the truth. And the truth is bigger than anything. Any challenge, any idea, anything, truth is truth. So, what I know, often we know something, have you noticed this maybe for yourself, that we know something at an intellectual level, and we can say the words, and we know it, and yet, nothing seems to really shift. Like we know it, but we don't know it. You know what I mean? Like it's not showing up, because if we really knew it, it would have to show up. Because there's no time and space, so it has to show up. So Dr. Holmes says, you are never limited by the principle of your being. Never limited. Limitation is a result of a limited use of that principle. You can come to but one conclusion. There is something which honors your belief. Not in a big way in one place, or in a little way in another. Rather, it honors your belief as you believe it. And that's not the words that are coming out of your mouth, it's in your heart. Because we can kind of pretend. Anybody here, we kind of pretend that we know, and yet it's not showing up. So, to really know, to really believe, he continues by saying, the negative use of this creative power of thought, then, is a very real thing, and indeed is at the root of all our troubles. All varying forms of fear are rooted in one fundamental negation. We do not know that we belong to the universe in which we live. We do not realize that God needs us, or we wouldn't be here. You're here because God's not done with you yet. There's something for you, or you wouldn't be here. So, this last several months has been, again, for me, another opportunity to remember that. To remember that truth. So I don't think there was anybody more surprised than me when I got a diagnosis of stage 4 ovarian cancer. Now, that's scary words for anybody. But what was amazing to me and to the doctors is I never felt one moment of fear. There was something inside of me. That's when I knew I'd arrived. There was something inside of me that knew and knew that I knew. I knew that God wasn't done with me because I know that my work in Kenya is not done. I'm just, right now, we just graduated the first practitioner class. Yay! Isn't that exciting? So I know that I'm not done because I know that those practitioners, we have 4 practitioners in Kenya, and every one of them has declared that they want to be ministers. So I'm not done. I got a ministerial class I got to teach. So I know with every cell of my being that it wasn't done. So, being the good metaphysician that I am, so what do we do? As a metaphysician, we ask sometimes the really tough, would you call them a tough question, right, Pat? Like often we ask the tough questions. So one of the things that we believe is that life is always good. Not sometimes, all the time. So that means that this is good. Has to be. Here's where we get tied up. We think that if it's good, it's got to feel good. And it's got to look good. Yeah, not so much. Does not mean it's not good. So I knew that there was something here that was good. There was some reason for me having this experience. And so the answer that I got kind of shocked me a little bit. The answer that I got is that this was going to be my miracle story. Now, the truth is, we don't believe in miracles, as the way most of the universe believes in, most of Earth believes in miracles. We believe that miracles are the natural way that the universe works when we let it. Everyday miracles. It is the way that God works through us when we get out of our own way and we allow it to work. So why would I need a miracle? If there really aren't any miracles, then the question I ask, why would I need a miracle? What is this all about? And so what I realized is that there's many people in the world, and predominantly in the culture in Kenya where I am, cancer is a death sentence. Used to be that way here a few years ago, not that long ago. Not so much anymore. There's many people that survive it. Even stage 4 ovarian cancer can be survived. I know that absolutely to be true. Because the truth is that God doesn't care about the severity of anything. It doesn't care if it's a hangnail or cancer. God doesn't care. There's no difference between something small or something big. There's just truth revealing itself. We make it big. We get in our own ways. We make up a story about what's big and what's little. We make a story that that's a really big thing and it can't be overcome. We have a genetic predisposition in my family called BRCA1, this genetic whatever that's going on. And I never really bought into that before. But my family did. And then the whole medical community, like that diagnosis, I got to tell you, it was not pretty. The prognosis was not pretty, but I never believed it for one moment. For one moment. So a few months ago, I was at the Kelowna Ministers Conference, and Dr. Pat was there, and we were having a conversation, and I talked with many of the people there, and it was the week before I was to have surgery. And I just kept saying, it's done, it's gone. I knew it was gone. I felt it leave my body. I knew that it was no longer there. I said, so when they go in to operate, there's going to be nothing to remove. It's gone. And so everybody was holding that truth for me. So the next week, I'm in surgery, and they opened me up, and nobody was more surprised than the surgical oncologist. She told me afterwards, there was nothing to remove. It was gone. True story. Yeah. What are you holding to be true? We can get hooked into cultural beliefs. We can get hooked into stories that aren't true. The truth of our being is that life is always good and it is always for us. It is always conspiring for our good. So I knew that that too had to be good. I got to tell you, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. You know, I lost my hair and lost a bunch of other stuff and had to leave my home in Kenya for 6 months and be here. And yet there's good. There's good everywhere. So my title of my talk today is Honoring Our Roots, because the truth is our roots, this beautiful picture that Pat put up, the roots, what are our roots? What are we honoring? Are we honoring the truth, or are we honoring our fear? Because it doesn't matter to God what we honor. It just, whatever we believe to be true gets to be our experience. There's nothing out there that is making it different than what we believe. It is as we believe. Holmes says, if fear is contagious, you ever noticed that fear is kind of contagious? You know, people start talking about their fear and, you know, what they're, and it's contagious, right? Like, we just get hooked into it because there's a lot of passion behind it. But he says, if fear is contagious, faith is even more so. Because it is more natural to have faith than it is to be afraid. I'm going to say that again. It is more natural to have faith than it is to be afraid. Might feel natural to be afraid for us, but it's not the truth of our being. He says, we can never believe that a negative viewpoint has the same power as a positive one any more than we can believe that darkness can obliterate light. We know that's not true. It is the light that destroys the darkness, and we must see to it that our consciousness is filled with light. That's what spiritual mind treatment does. Even in those moments, or perhaps even most especially in that moment when we are in that dark place ourselves, to have a community, or in my case, there was communities all over the world, holding the truth, holding the light in those moments that maybe I forgot. But I knew that there was that whole web of people that knew the truth for me. And that's why it is so important. Don't forget to get the spiritual help that is available to you. Yes, absolutely. It is here. He says, fear is a habit of thought. It's a habit. And it creates a subconscious mental pattern which repeats itself with monotonous regularity. Until and it will continue with that monotonous regularity until the light of truth displaces fear with faith. Faith, on the other hand, rightly cultivated, will repeat itself with buoyant regularity always. Both fear and faith are habits of thought and can be cultivated. So which ones are you honoring? Which belief do you want to honor? Your fear? God says, okay, you want more of that? Here you go. Or your faith in the truth. What we teach here, we call this a truth teaching. And it truly is, because it is true. It works every time when we allow it to work. Even when we don't allow it to work, it's still working because it works to our belief in it. So if we believe it isn't going to work, we get to be right about that too. Go figure. So we get to be right in what it is that we believe. And that will outpicture in our life. So I'm going home. I'm so excited. Yes. I've been given the clearance to go home, to travel back to Kenya. And I got to tell you, my students are so eagerly awaiting. So I arrived back in Nairobi on January 1st at 5:50 in the morning. Isn't that a great day to arrive back to start a new year in my spiritual home? So I'm so delighted that that is happening. So CSL Kenya, even though I've been gone for 6 months, this is really great. This is when I know that the work that I'm doing is really taking root, because it's been growing and flourishing even when I've not been there. And our center moved into its own home. Yeah, in this beautiful garden. We have this lovely cottage in a garden, and the lending library's all set up because people love the lending library. Because believe it or not, all of the books that we take for granted here, not available there, unless I take them with me, which I do every year. So we have a lending library with over 1,000 different copies of books. I have to take all of the books for every class I teach with me when I go over. That's a lot of books every year. You know, I first thought, I had this idea that, you know, the students would take a class and they'd give the books back. Yeah, it didn't happen so much. But I had a shift in consciousness, because I thought, you know what, if they love these books so much and they can't part with them, I can get more books. There's an abundance of books. So there's always enough books. So I'm always taking more books and more books. Last year when I was here, you might remember that we were just gearing up for a teen group. Well, we do it a little bit differently over there because most of our teens go to boarding school. So they're away most of the time, but they're, you know, at school for 3 months, home for a month, at school 3 months, that kind of thing. So on the months that they're home, we have teen group for an entire day. I had an average of 12 teens every week. And these were teens I'd never met before, all but one I had met. They were the youth of, all of them had a parent that had been in classes, and they wanted something. They came to me and said, can you do something for us? We want what they have. Can you imagine the teens wanting it that deeply in their soul? So the teen group is alive and well and growing all of the time. And this year, as you may have heard, we are having the first ever New Thought Conference on African soil in Nairobi, Kenya, the end of January of 2020. Currently, I have 50 people already signed up and registered from North America. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. You're all invited. You can all come to Africa as well. I'd love to have you there. And we anticipate having at least that many Kenyans participate. I've actually got a woman signed up from Botswana that is coming to our conference, has heard about it. Can you imagine? So you can also, if you're not going and you want to support it, I have a sponsorship program where you can sponsor having a local Kenyan attend the conference for $100 US. I'm speaking US dollars because that's a currency that is known there. And that gives them 3 days of the conference and their lunches every day, because that's a lot of money for most of my students. So if you want to participate and make a difference in the world, you're, by all means, I encourage you to do that. There's pamphlets out on the front that you can learn more about that. So some of the things that we're going to be doing there, other than the conference, we're going to go on safari to the Masai Mara. I mean, you can't go to Africa or Kenya and not go to the Masai Mara. And then we're going to do a cultural outreach program where we go into some of the places up country where I have students that live a long ways out, and doing some projects with them. One at boys' home, you may have heard me talk about before, where they rescue boys that live in the garbage dump. Most of them are HIV positive, and they take these boys in and they get them clean and they support them and they send them to school. So we'll be visiting the boys' home. We'll be going to another place called Kisumu, where this is a great story. there's a woman in California that has been doing a project in this remote area that is very, very, I heard an estimate that they estimate that 66% of every youth in that area is HIV positive. It's unbelievable. So she runs a program there for youth that are HIV positive, to support them in how to live with it, because there's medical support for them, but you know, the support for people that are actually living with it. So we'll be visiting that group. And what's really wonderful, this woman in California that does the group, she's been going over to Kenya every year or every 6 months for a number of years, didn't know I was there. She took her executive director, got him a visa to go to the United States to take foundations class 2 years ago, not knowing I was in Nairobi teaching it. So this past year, they have been paying to fly me up there, because it's a 10-hour drive one way. They fly me up there every 2 weeks to teach Science of Mind to their entire team. We'll be visiting them as well. So we're going to do some really amazing, amazing projects when we're up there as well. So I could go on and on. If you want to hear more about the stories, come see me. I'll be out in the lobby. I could go on and on about the stories and about what this teaching does. Dr. Pat talked about, you know, co-creating a world that works for everyone. And can you imagine, in a world where this is so new, how incredible that is, and the difference that it makes in people's lives is astronomical. So I want to close today with another Holmes quote. And I invite you to join with me if these words resonate for you, to remember them this week. We are alive with life, with joy, and continuously upheld by a deep, unshakable conviction that there is a presence and a power and an intelligence in the universe, and that good is finally to come to everyone, and that all problems will be solved. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you. My buddy.